First of all, then, this is literally unprecedented. The first Prime Minister of the UK to be sanctioned for breaking the law, but he's hanging on in there. I suppose, first of all, in terms of communicating that, in terms of that message, is that one that is going to hold for the time being?
Well, I think that we know Boris Johnson is somebody who resists political gravity, but I think the question is whether he defies it completely, and the answer is probably not. I think he's in the hottest water he's ever been in. It doesn't surprise me that he's not resigning because he's not really a resigner. I think you'd have to carry him out by both arms and legs, to be honest with you. So I'm not surprised he's hanging in there. And I think he'll hang in there, to be honest, until his MPs, by either by writing to the 1922 committee or by other means, make it very clear that he's gone and that they won't support him. He's just not a resigner, so I don't see him going. And my gut feeling is that his MPs will give a little bit of time, maybe over Easter, maybe waiting to see what Sue Gray says, maybe to see if it blows over, like it had largely started to do with the help of the Ukraine crisis. And I think they'll give him just a little bit more time to see whether or not he's still the guy that can win them their seats, because ultimately that's what this is actually down to.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because in terms of the response to this, there was a lag. There was a big delay from when we learned about the fines to when any support of any kind was forthcoming. And I just think that is something that we should reflect upon. Perhaps, to be cynical, it was really because MPs were considering, well, hang on a minute, what does this mean for me? Is that fair to say, do you think?
Oh, I think it does. I mean, I think we have to accept there's a very healthy dose of self-interest here amongst the MPs. We can look at polling all the time in public opinion, and there was a snap poll, I think, by YouGov yesterday showing that the public wanted both to resign. But the general election is quite a long way away. And ultimately, these MPs, it's a very strange coalition, which arguably nobody else other than Boris Johnson can lead. You're talking about shipbuilders from the north of England and bankers from the south of England all voting for the same party. It's quite unusual. And he brings this coalition together probably like nobody else can. And ultimately, they have to think very carefully about whether or not anybody else can lead them to victory. And it's difficult to see anybody else who can do the same job that Boris Johnson does. So I think they'll give a little bit of time. We've got, at least a year and a bit to go before an election, maybe even over 2 years to go before we have an election. That's quite a lot of time. There's quite a lot of water that can flow under the bridge in that space of time. And I think they will give this a chance to blow over. I guess the caveat to that is that if Sue Gray, if her report next week makes this situation worse somehow, I suppose it's difficult to see how it could become worse at this point, but it's possible she could make it worse. And then you've got the Easter break when all these MPs are going back to their constituencies. They'll be getting it in their ear from their families, from their friends, from people they meet in the shops, from people they might canvass. And do they come back with a kind of renewed scepticism about Boris Johnson and then start putting letters back in to the 1922 committee? I think that's the big question. But we do have somebody here, and we talked about this the last time when Partygate started. We've got somebody here who we've been told is down and out on many, many, many occasions in the past, during the Brexit campaign, during the election, during the Theresa May election as Tory leader, when we were told that Boris Johnson's career was over. We've been told he's finished a lot, and I think we should probably all know better than to presume that one act finishes him off. I think we've got to give it a bit of time to see how this pans out.
To what extent, Andy, is public trust important? You mentioned the general election there, which could be sort of about 2 years away. And I just wonder, in terms of the kind of mountain to climb in building and winning back public trust, because that is at the heart of this, actually, is that while the public at large were obeying the rules, the Prime Minister was not. He was breaking the law. And I just wonder how important that will be in a general election campaign.
I think that's probably his biggest problem, because what he was able to do was to persuade millions of people that he understood them and that he was like them. And they were all obeying the rules, his rules, and he broke them. So I think with some people that will never be recovered. And I think it's quite difficult at this point to just tell how big that constituency of people is who have voted for him, but now will say, I'm never doing that again. You conned me. You're not who I thought you were. But there will also be quite a big chunk of people who say, look, he did this. It was probably a mistake. But actually, in the grand scheme of things, is it that big a deal? There will be quite a lot of people, I think, who think that. And if you look at polling generally, Labour are now ahead, as arguably you might expect at the midpoint of our government, and especially a government which has undergone such a lot of turbulence. Labour are ahead, but they're only 6-7 points ahead on average. It's not that much. There will be a lot of Tories and MPs in particular who will look at that and say, well, you'd kind of bake that in to the midterm of a government. We can actually bring this back. Keir Starmer is not setting the heather alight, as we would say in Scotland, Calum. And there is a long way to go where he could still win. So I just don't think it's quite clear-cut enough that all the public are as furious with him as a lot of the people who you'll see quoted in the papers or writing on Twitter.
Andy, really grateful for your thoughts this morning. Thank you very much.